My name is Sophie Langford. I am 36 years old. I live in a quiet neighborhood outside Fort Collins, Colorado. From the outside, my life looks calm and stable. A steady job, a clean home, a marriage that has lasted 8 years. But on the night everything ended, I learned how fragile appearances can be. That day was supposed to matter. It was June 12th, our wedding anniversary. It was also my husband Peter Langford's birthday. 8 years together, and I still believed moments like this meant something. I left work early, drove across town to buy his favorite red wine, stopped at a specialty butcher for Wagyu short ribs, even though I was never confident in the kitchen. I wanted the effort to speak for me. I set the table carefully, white tablecloth, candles, soft lights strung along the balcony. A small custom cake waited in the fridge with a simple message written on top. Happy birthday and happy anniversary. Nothing dramatic, just honest. By 7 p.m. I was ready. I changed into a dress Peter once said he liked. I checked my phone. Nothing. At 8 I lit the candles. At 9 I sent a short text saying I was waiting. No reply. At 9:30 I called. It rang until voicemail. At 10:35 p.m. an email arrived. One sentence. Big client emergency. Staying at the office. We will make it up later. No apology, no happy anniversary, no explanation. The candles had already burned down. The room smelled faintly of smoke and untouched food. I stood there holding a folded napkin I had prepared for him. I did not cry, but something inside my chest shifted, quietly, permanently. That night I packed the food away, turned off the lights, took everything down by myself. I went to bed in the same dress, and as I lay there staring at the ceiling I understood one thing. This was not just a late night. This was the beginning of the end. From the outside, Peter Langford looked like the kind of man people admired. He was confident, well-dressed, always composed. He worked as a sales team leader for a real estate firm and spoke with the kind of certainty that made people trust him quickly. When we attended events together, I often heard the same comment, "You are so lucky." What they did not see was how quiet our marriage had become. Peter was rarely home before 10. When he would loosen his tie, glance at his phone, and say he had already eaten. Conversations became updates instead of connection, meetings, deadlines, numbers. I learned not to ask how his day went because the answer was always the same, long. I worked full-time as well, accounting support for a medical supplier, nothing glamorous but steady. I paid my share, I cleaned, I cooked when I could, I adjusted my schedule around his. Somewhere along the way my needs were quietly edited out of the relationship. There were nights I sat alone with dinner growing cold, convincing myself this was normal. That grown-up marriages looked like this. That love matured into silence. I told myself Peter showed care in other ways. Paying bills. Planning vacations that rarely happened. Leaving notes that said busy but thinking of you. But thinking of someone is not the same as showing up for them. When I tried to talk about how distant we felt, Peter would sigh and say I was overthinking. That work was stressful. That real wives understood sacrifice. Eventually I stopped bringing it up. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I was tired of being the only one who noticed the damage. The truth is our marriage did not collapse in one night. It eroded slowly, like water wearing down stone. Quiet, persistent, almost invisible. That anniversary dinner was not the first time I waited for Peter. It was just the first time I finally stopped lying to myself about what the waiting meant. The next morning I woke up early and went to work like nothing had happened. I showered. I dressed. I drank my coffee standing at the counter. I told myself Peter was just overwhelmed, and that we would talk when things calmed down. That was the habit I had trained myself into. Delay your feelings. Stay reasonable. Be patient. By noon I had not heard from him. No message. No missed call. I tried dialing his number again. It rang until voicemail. Something tight settled in my chest. Not panic yet. Just a quiet unease I could not explain. During my lunch break I stepped into an empty hallway and called his office. I had never done that before. Peter did not like personal calls at work. The phone rang twice before a receptionist answered. I asked for him by name. There was a pause, just long enough to feel wrong. "Oh," she said slowly. "Peter does not work here anymore. He resigned 3 days ago." I did not understand at first. I asked her to repeat it. She cleared her throat and said the same thing again. He turned in his resignation. He did not leave forwarding information. I stood there holding my phone while people walked past me. 3 days. That meant he had already quit before our anniversary, before the dinner, before the email about a client emergency. My thoughts raced backward. The late nights, the vague answers, the way he avoided eye contact recently. It all rearranged itself into a new picture, clear, unforgiving. This was not about work. There was no emergency. There was no office keeping him late. Peter was leaving, and I was the last person he planned to tell. I thanked the receptionist without knowing why and hung up. My hands were shaking now. The unease had turned into certainty. Whatever was waiting for me at home was not a conversation. It was an ending. For the first time in 8 years, I did not try to soften the truth. I did not make excuses for him. I did not look for reasons to stay calm. I just knew. By the time I clocked out of work, my heart was already bracing itself. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched. Every turn felt heavier. I was not driving back to my marriage. I was driving straight toward the moment everything I believed about my life would be stripped away. I unlocked the apartment door just after 6. The silence inside felt heavier than usual. No television, no music, no familiar movement. My eyes went straight to the shoe rack near the entrance. The second row was empty. Peter's brown leather shoes were gone. I called his name once, no answer. I walked toward the bedroom with a slow, steady pace, as if my body already knew what I would find. The door was half open. Inside, Peter stood near the bed with an open suitcase laid flat on the floor. Clothes were piled around him. A navy suit, a pressed white shirt, a tie I had never seen before. On the dresser sat a pair of new dress shoes with the tag still attached. He looked up when he saw me. His expression did not change. "You are home," he said calmly and returned to folding his shirt. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice sounded distant even to me. "I accepted a new position out of state," he replied without looking up. "Albuquerque. I start next week." I stood there frozen. You quit your job, you planned all of this, and you did not say a word to me. Peter zipped the suitcase halfway and reached into his bag. He pulled out a thin folder and placed it on the bed between us. He opened it and slid the first page forward. Divorce papers. I stared at the page as if it were written in another language. "Peter, what is this?" I whispered. He finally met my eyes. "You are not the wife I need anymore." The words landed with precision. "You always put work first," he continued. "The house is never in order. You cook when it is convenient for you. You stop trying." I felt something break loose in my chest. "I work full-time just like you. I clean. I plan. I wait for you. You come home late and say you already ate. I try and you ignore it." He waved his hand dismissively. "Do not turn this into a list of excuses. A real wife does not need reminders." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. "So now this is my fault." Peter closed the folder and stood up. "I have made my decision. I suggest you accept it with dignity." He lifted the suitcase and walked past me toward the door. No apology, no explanation, no hesitation. The door clicked shut behind him. I sank to the floor, clutching the papers in my hands. The room felt suddenly enormous and empty. In that moment I understood something clearly. This was not a fight. This was not a phase. My marriage had ended long before I was allowed to know. I stayed on the floor long after the door closed. The apartment felt unfamiliar now, like a place I was only borrowing. The divorce papers rested in my hands, but I did not open them again. I already knew what they said. Names, dates, legal language designed to erase 8 years with clean margins. Peter did not call that night, or the next morning. 2 days later my phone rang while I was at work. It was the building management office. The woman on the line spoke politely as if this were a routine request. "Mrs. Langford," she said, "we received a notice to terminate the lease. The primary leaseholder informed us he no longer lives in the unit. The remaining occupant is expected to vacate by the end of the month." For a moment I could not speak. I asked her to repeat what she had said. She did and added one more detail. "He left a note. He stated that you would clear out and move before the contract ends." No discussion, no warning, no message to me. That evening I went home and opened every drawer, every cabinet. I found the receipts for the sofa, the dining table, the refrigerator. Almost everything was under my name. Peter had taken only his clothes and a few personal devices. He left behind the life we'd built like it was a temporary arrangement. I walked through the rooms slowly. The balcony where I had hung the lights, the kitchen where untouched meals once waited, the bedroom that still smelled faintly like his cologne. It was then something inside me shifted again, not with pain this time but with clarity. Peter did not leave because he was unhappy. He left because it was easier to walk away than to face what he had become. That night I placed the divorce papers on the table and did not hide them away. They stayed there in plain sight. Not as a threat, not as a wound, but as the truth. And for the first time in a long while I slept without waiting for anyone to come home. The divorce papers stayed on the dining table for 3 days. I passed them every morning before work and every night before bed. I did not avoid them. I also did not reach for a pen, not because I hoped Peter would come back, but because I needed to understand something first. I needed to understand how I had arrived here without noticing the exact moment I disappeared from my own marriage. I replayed the past 8 years slowly, the compromises that started small and became routine, the way I stopped voicing disappointment because it felt inconvenient, the way I learned to be grateful for the bare minimum. I realized I had been managing the marriage the same way I managed problems at work, quietly, efficiently, alone. There was no dramatic betrayal scene, no screaming arguments, no obvious villain. Just a steady pattern of neglect that I kept excusing because it was easier than admitting I was lonely. Signing those papers meant accepting a hard truth. I had not been abandoned overnight. I had been fading out for years. Peter simply finished what silence had already started. On the third evening I made myself dinner and sat at the table across from the documents. I read every line carefully. I did not rush. I did not cry. I let the finality settle in. When I was done I placed the papers back in the folder and closed it. Not yet, I said out loud to an empty room. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed one last moment to choose myself with full awareness. That pause was not weakness. It was the last courtesy I gave to a life I was about to leave behind. On Saturday night I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, not to impress anyone. Just to make sure I still recognized myself, I chose a simple black dress and pulled my hair back, clean, uncomplicated. I was attending my 18-year high school reunion at a small brewery in downtown Fort Collins. I had paid for the ticket months ago, back when I assumed Peter would be at my side. I almost did not go. Then I realized staying home would only prove how much of my world had already shrunk. The room was loud and crowded and full of familiar faces softened by time. I hovered near the back until someone called my name. It was Lucas Bennett. He used to sit 2 rows behind me in history class. He smiled like nothing had changed and offered me a drink. We talked easily. He told me he had been divorced for 3 years and was raising his daughter on his own. There was no bitterness in his voice, just honesty. When he asked about Peter, the first answered simply, "We are getting divorced." No details, no apologies. Lucas nodded and changed the subject without pressing. I felt something loosen inside my chest. For the first time in weeks, I was not being examined or pitied. I was just a person in a room having a normal conversation. Driving home later with the windows down, I turned on the radio. An old song played, one I used to sing quietly while cleaning the apartment alone. The words landed differently now, clear, unavoidable. I realized that night that my life was not over. It had simply stopped revolving around someone who was never really there. 1 week after I submitted the divorce through my attorney, my phone vibrated close to 10 p.m. It was an email from Peter. The subject line contained a single word: proof. I opened it without hesitation. A photograph filled the screen. A marriage certificate, his name printed clearly. Peter Langford. Beneath it another name, Clara Whitman, stamped and dated in New Mexico. The date was 1 day after the court finalized our divorce. Before I could process it, my phone rang. Peter did not wait long. "You saw it right," he said. "I got married. Life is finally moving forward." I did not respond. I let the silence stretch. "Her family owns one of the biggest real estate groups in Santa Fe," he continued. "They helped me secure an executive role. We have a house already. Everything is handled." "So that is why you needed the divorce so quickly," I said evenly. "Not entirely," he replied. "I just could not stay with someone who put work before her role as a wife." I almost laughed but held it back. "Clara does not work," Peter added proudly. "She chose to focus on the home. And she is pregnant. 3 months. Each sentence felt rehearsed, like a pitch, a justification delivered too smoothly to be sincere. I listened until he finished, then wished him well and ended the call. Afterward I sat quietly and repeated her name out loud. Clara Whitman. It stirred something faint and uncomfortable in my memory. I opened social media and searched. Her profile appeared instantly. elegant photos, perfect angles, a carefully curated life. Then I scrolled further back and stopped. I recognized her. Clara Whitman used to be Clara Mills. We had gone to the same high school. She had been quiet, awkward, often overlooked. The woman in those photos looked nothing like the girl I remembered except for one thing: her eyes. That night I understood what Peter had chosen: not love, not connection, an image, a future polished to erase everything that came before. And for the first time since he left, I felt nothing at all. I called my old friend Hannah the next morning. We had known each other since sophomore year, and if anyone remembered high school clearly, it was her. I asked one question: "Do you remember Clara Mills?" There was a pause followed by a soft laugh. "Of course I do, why?" I told her everything. About Peter, the sudden divorce, the remarriage, the new name. When I finished, Hannah exhaled slowly. She changed her entire life after moving to New York, she said. Art school, new circles, new face, multiple surgeries, nose, jaw, eyes, chin. People stopped calling her Clara Mills years ago. That explained the feeling I could not shake, the sense that something had been carefully edited out. I remembered Clara from school. She sat near the back, rarely spoke unless spoken to. She avoided mirrors and cameras. She kept her head down in the hallways. The kind of girl who learned early that attention could be cruel. Now she stood beside Peter in a white dress, smiling like someone who had finally won. What struck me most was not the surgery or the money. It was the similarity between them. Peter had also erased his past. He never shared old photos, never talked about his college friends, insisted on a small wedding with no one from before. At the time I called it privacy. Now I saw it for what it was: shame. Two people who rewrote themselves found each other. They built a life designed to look flawless from the outside. New names, new roles, new power. But nothing built on erasure stays solid for long. I sat alone that evening thinking about how much effort it takes to pretend, how exhausting it must be to maintain an image every single day, to wake up afraid that the wrong detail might slip through. I did not feel envy. I did not feel anger. I felt relief. Because while they were busy hiding who they used to be, I was finally learning how to stand comfortably in exactly who I was. 2 weeks later, an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. I did not answer at first. Then it rang again and again. Something told me to pick up. It was Peter. "Clara gave birth," he said immediately. "A baby girl." I waited. "She does not look like either of us," he continued. His voice was tight now, stripped of the confidence I had heard before. "I thought it was just swelling or lighting, but I ran a DNA test. She is mine. That is not the issue." "Then what is?" I asked calmly. "She will not hold the baby, Sophie. Every time she looks at her face, she turns away. Yesterday her mother had to take the baby from the nurse because Clara refused. I do not understand." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice. Only a quiet heaviness for a child who had entered the world already carrying someone else's disappointment. "Do you remember your high school graduation album?" I asked. There was silence on the line. "I found it while cleaning the apartment," I continued. "You had asked me not to touch that drawer, but I did. I saw the photos, Peter. Curly hair, crooked teeth, acne. You were not ugly, you were human." "I changed because I was insecure," he said softly. "No," I replied. "You changed because you wanted to escape who you were, just like Clara." He exhaled shakily. "You think she will look like that version of us?" "I think she will look like the truth," I said, "and the truth always shows up eventually." Another pause. "I have no idea what to do," he whispered. This time I did speak gently. "Love her anyway. Do not punish her for carrying what you tried to erase." He started to say something else, but I stopped him. "You once told me I failed as a wife because I did not sacrifice enough. But right now the only person refusing his role is you." I ended the call and blocked the number, not out of anger, out of finality. That night I understood something clearly. I had walked away before the damage reached me. But that child would grow up inside it. And for the first time I felt grateful that my life no longer belonged to people who could not face themselves. Nearly a year passed without me speaking Peter's name out loud. Not because I was trying to forget him, but because my life no longer needed a reference point from the past. I moved into a small apartment in Boulder 10 minutes from my office. It had a narrow balcony and enough sunlight to grow herbs in mismatched pots. Mornings became quiet in a good way. I woke early, made coffee, and sat by the window without rushing. I reduced my work hours and stopped measuring my worth by exhaustion. I signed up for a weekend art class, something I had always postponed because it did not fit into anyone else's schedule. I reconnected with friends, some old, some new. Lucas and I spent time together without labels or pressure. We walked, talked, and shared silence comfortably. Nothing had to be proven. One afternoon I ran into Hannah at a used bookstore. She mentioned Peter without drama. He was already in trouble again. Another affair, a marriage unraveling just as quickly as it had formed. I listened without reaction. I felt no triumph, only distance. I went home that day, stopped by a bakery, and bought a small croissant. I ate it slowly on a park bench, watching the light shift through the trees. My life was simple now, no chaos, no image to maintain. And for the first time in years, simplicity felt like freedom. People often ask whether I forgave Peter. I usually smile and tell them I did not need to. Forgiveness implies a debt. What I chose was release. I did not rebuild my life to prove anything. I rebuilt it because staying would have meant erasing myself piece by piece. Walking away was not dramatic, it was deliberate. Some people chase reinvention through power, status, or beauty. Others find it through honesty. One path demands constant maintenance, the other asks only that you stop pretending. Peter and Claire tried to outrun their past. But the truth has a way of showing up quietly through time, through children, through consequences no one can edit away. I chose something else. I chose clarity, peace, and a life that does not require explanation. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where you may be shrinking to keep someone else comfortable. Like this video if you have ever been underestimated, share it with someone who needs permission to walk away, and comment below with your thoughts. This is not a story about revenge. It is a story about freedom,